Thanks, Mr. President. Earlier this week, I spoke about the historic accomplishments of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs with my good friend and Vice Chair, Lisa Murkowski, over the last 4 years. I made it very clear that the foundation of this success was and continues to be Native leaders, communities, and advocates sharing their priorities and telling us what's most important to them. I also emphasize that we cannot and will not rest on our laurels because our progress is still in progress. And that's why today we have to pass S. 1723, the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding School Policies Act. This bill would establish a federal commission to investigate the federal Indian boarding school era, when the federal government partnered with religious institutions in an attempt to assimilate Native children at so-called schools, often far from their homes and families, where they were stripped of their culture, languages, and identities, beaten and abused, both mentally and physically. Thousands, likely more, died at those schools, and those who returned home were never the same. The Truth and Healing Commission would turn the page on this shameful era and help begin the healing process for Native survivors, descendants, and communities, and those who continue to experience the generational trauma and lasting legacy of these policies today. S. 1723 passed out of the committee after extensive bipartisan debate. Since then, Vice Chair Murkowski and I have worked with the bill's sponsor, Senator Warren, the Native American Boarding School Coalition, and other advocates to refine the bill and to accommodate feedback. The current version of this legislation is the result of hundreds of hours of drafting, redrafting, discussion, and tough negotiations. I'll now turn it over to the Vice Chair for some remarks before I make a unanimous consent.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, I want to thank and acknowledge Senator Schatz as well as his team on the Indian Affairs Committee for their work as we have sought to advance S. 1723, the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding School Policies. I also want to acknowledge Senator Warren for her help on this, and of course, the Native American Boarding School Coalition, so many of the advocates that really have helped us advance this. As the chairman of the committee has noted, we have worked this legislation over a long period of time, and it is a priority for us in the committee because for far too long, this dark legacy of the Indian boarding school era has just kind of sat in the corner, unrecognized, unacknowledged. From 1819 to 1969, the U.S. government forcibly removed Native children from their families and tribes, placing them in boarding schools. These Indian boarding schools, as they came to be called, were not just education institutions, but oftentimes they were viewed as tools to eradicate Native cultures, languages, and traditions to, quote, civilize, close quote, Native American children. Again, a very dark era within our government. And so what we seek to do with this bill is create a commission to bring light to the generational trauma caused by this time of Indian boarding schools. By allowing people's stories to be heard, we can help honor the experience of victims and their families, facilitate healing, and foster greater understanding and empathy among all people. I think this is a good step, an important step in helping the survivors of Indian boarding schools and the families and communities that were impacted, help them find healing. We have heard stories, I have heard stories of many in my state who attended boarding school, some in the state of Alaska, some outside the state of Alaska. The listening sessions that Secretary Holland led as Secretary of Interior on this very important issue, again, these are stories that must be recognized, and again, I thank those who have shared them because at many times they were very painful, covering scars from the past, but how we can offer ways to pursue healing is what this commission is all about. So again, my thanks to Chairman Schatz for being such a great partner on this legislation, as well as well as on so many other matters that we have been able to advance successfully through the committee. And my thanks to the chairman's team and to mine as the ranking member on the committee. We've done good work. It's been a successful year for the committee, and I'm hoping that there is a path somehow that this legislation will actually be able to be taken up by the House of Representatives and signed into law. That would be a good and a fitting ending.
Mr. President,
Senator from Hawaii.
as if in legislative session and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 432, S-1723.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 432, S-1723, a bill to establish the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian boarding school policies in the United States and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the committee-reported substitute amendment be withdrawn, the Schatz Murkowski substitute amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time.
Without objection.
I know of no further debate on the bill as amended.
Is there further debate? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill as amended is passed.
I ask that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is no small task for us to confront the unbearable burden of our history. Yet to stand before that history in silence, to remain idle while these wounds persist, is to turn away from one of the most fundamental acts of justice and healing that we are in a position to do something about. We have to turn the light on and let the truth out. And this is the work that we've done in the Senate now, and we do hope the House takes action and passes this incredibly important measure into law. I yield the floor.